Welcome to In Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mactacular. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get right to the point today because I'm struggling with some serious internet issues and likely will be for the next few days. So I'm going to get right to the point, and I want to get to a story that we covered a few days ago. But before we do, I got to take you back to yesterday. Rememberize, yes, something we talked about already. Gotta rememberize some things we talked about, yeah. Taking you back, but not way back. I just read you this yesterday, silly. This is a tweet from May 12th. And this was part of another subject here, so this was kind of adding on to a previous tweet where Trump had said, and the Democratic National Committee, the Democrat Party apparatus, has been caught using donor dollars to collude with Russian intelligence to attack a domestic political opponent, me. Of course, he's talking about Trump-Russia collusion that never existed. But I was pointing out that I noticed that even though President Trump had not capitalized donor, he had capitalized dollars. And then, of course, we see DCRI. Now, Russia, of course, I would imagine would be capitalized. But I started to think about French intelligence, the DCRI. I'm not exactly sure why POTUS would give a nod to French intelligence. He was actually talking about Russia intelligence. But was this also a nod to the DCRI? Well, unbeknownst to me, we also had this story here from ABC News. This is from the 11th, to be fair, so it was a little before. French forces rescue American during raid to free hostages in Africa. French soldiers led a raid to rescue two tourists who had been kidnapped in the West African country of Burkina Faso and ended up also freeing an American and a South Korean who they were unaware were being held. They were unaware, huh? Several U.S. officials told ABC News that the U.S. government was unaware until Friday that the American woman was being held. The raid resulted in the death of two French soldiers. The two former French hostages and Korean hostage were brought to the presidential palace of Kosium in Ouagadougou at 8:50 a.m. local time on Saturday. French hostage Laurent Lossimouillat paid tribute to the French soldiers killed during the operation in a short statement saying, "All our thoughts go to the family of the soldiers and the soldiers who lost their lives to free us from this hell. We wanted to offer our condolences right away." The U.S. woman was not with the other three rescued hostages. Her name has not been released, but a U.S. official described her as being in her 60s. U.S. forces were not involved in the raid, French defense officials said at a news conference in Paris, but did provide some intelligence support, which helped French forces locate the hostages and their kidnappers. It seems these other two hostages, the American and South Korean, had been held hostage for 28 days, says Francois Leconte, the chief of staff of the French armed forces. French Minister of the Armed Forces, Florence Parly, said French authorities don't know much about the American and South Korean women, but that they are in a safe place. Conversations with U.S. and South Korean officials appeared to confirm that neither country had known about the hostages, Parly said. French officials didn't share the American's identity or provide any more information about her. Okay, so this is pretty wild right here, and let me just read this last part. The two French tourists had been on safari in the Pendjari National Park in Benin, near the Burkina Faso border, where they discovered along with their tour guide on May 1st. 3 days later, the tour guide, identified as, good Lord, can you just nail me any harder with these names, Fiacre Gbeji, was found dead in the park, according to Benin's Ministry of Interior and Public Safety. Al-Qaeda and ISIS were known to operate in the area, officials said at the press conference, but they did not say that either of those groups or any Islamist extremist groups were involved. The French soldiers who died have been identified as Cédric de Pierrepont and Alain Bartoncello, and both were under the command of the Special Operations, the French president said in a statement. So this is an odd story, and it looks like we don't really know much either. Sounds like U.S. intelligence doesn't, but it looks like they got a little nod from French intelligence to find out about this. So could this be the nod that we were talking about? Who knows? but they call me Mystic Mac. No, they don't, but you guys do, and sometimes that's pretty cool too. So, President Trump was just meeting with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, and he took a question right at the very end of his meeting that had to do with this event. Check out what he has to say, and more particularly, check out his body language when he says it.
President, what can you tell us about this American citizen that was rescued by the French in Africa?
Yes, the French did a great job. The French did a great job, and we appreciate it very much, and I've already communicated that feeling. We worked with them on intelligence, and we were able to get that person back, and we thank the French very much. Great job.
Who is she? What was she doing?
I don't want to tell you that now. I'll tell you at some later date, I'm sure. Okay.
So there you go. Looks a little bit shifty right there. POTUS doesn't seem very comfortable letting us know who she was and what she was doing there. And maybe this is something that is relatively new to U.S. intelligence also. It seems like they weren't aware, right? So did the French intelligence throw us a solid? Who really knows? What was this tourist doing there? Why was she being held? Why did she seem to be kept apart from these other tourists? Why don't they want to release her name? Seems all very strange. Don't really know. Does that have anything to do with the POTUS tweet? Not really sure, but that's what ended up leading me to that story, and there you go. Now, what I really want to talk to you about today is just a little bit more details from a story we did the other day, and some of this is still really open-ended. So please keep in mind, this is just some additional research to what we've already talked about the other day. I am referring to my video from 3 days ago entitled LA Guns. And if you've not seen that video, I highly suggest you check it out first. Go ahead, I'll wait. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to keep going forward. But I highly suggest you check out this story before this video because it'll give you a lot of precursor knowledge to what we are talking about. But we are talking about this raid in LA where they took a bunch of guns from this Miss Beck's house. And this Miss Beck was related to the Gettys of Getty fame all over Los Angeles. So please go check out that video. But the raid was on this house right here, 111 South Beverly Glen, which led me to start checking out the neighborhood. And I actually had some questions that were sort of left unanswered, and I left them alone until I got an anonymous tip, which was a great tip, and it turned me back onto this story. So I want to throw a big shout out to whom I'm going to call Real Estate Anon, who helped me out with this a little bit and turned me back onto this story. So here's what we're going to do. We're looking at 111 South Beverly Glen. We're going to zoom in on that real quick. Now, if you'll remember, and like I said, watch the video first before checking this out. But this was, we had a bunch of properties that was registered to this Miss Beck, and she seems to be quite a socialite, used to be wrapped up with J. Paul Getty's son, and we'll go into that more at some other time, but a lot of these properties were left open. They weren't being developed. They were sort of just run down. They found all these different guns. A lot of them were collector's items and whatnot. What I find interesting about this picture on the Googly map here is that you'll see that although it doesn't seem to be anybody living in these houses, according to the story, you see cars parked in the driveway. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I see. But we're not going to even talk about this property today. What I want to talk about is this property right here across the street, 112 North Beverly Glen Boulevard. Now, if you'll notice, it's an open lot. I'm not sure if that's a boulder or a tree, but either way, if you wanted to develop here, you would have to remove whatever it is. But it looks like we've got an empty lot. And I see a bunch of green here. So it looks like it's been grown over. I don't know what they've been planning on doing. But this lot's been here for quite a while. As a matter of fact, what's curious about this is that we seem to have a parking lot here. Somebody's actually paved part of this lot into a parking lot, meaning that they either wanted this that way or they wanted it temporarily, or maybe that's going to be part of a driveway for a future. I have no idea, but considering the size of these homes, this seems very odd that you would just put an empty lot here. Now, I do want to give you a little SoCal perspective. For those of you who might not be familiar, in these hilly areas, it can sometimes be a really, really hard place to park. And other than these big driveways for these big homes, people would have to park along the street. And as you can see, that's pretty dangerous to do. So maybe that's why they built this lot. I'm just kind of trying to open up some ideas. But you can see there's a handful of cars right here using this lot. They may belong to some of these neighboring areas. I'm not really sure, and I don't want to theorize too much about that, but I do want to point out that that is a possibility. Maybe this is just a temporary thing to kind of offset that. But what we do have is we have an empty open lot at 112 North Beverly Glen, right across the street from where we had this LA Guns raid. Now, according to public records, as you can see here, 112 North Beverly Glen Boulevard, looks like back in 2010, the property taxes were $14,617. How'd you like to pay that every year for an empty lot? But there you go. Looks like this was bought back in 1997. Sold by Rain East Investments Limited, but more importantly, bought by one Hatan Pharaon. And that's what actually caught my attention to this story. And we'll talk about him in just a second. But it looks like he turned around and sold it in 2011. It was a while back. To the British Virgin Island Company. Yes, I suppose if you wanted to launder some money or get a tax haven, you go out to the British Virgin Island. This was bought by the way of HRP Investments Limited. And let me go ahead and show you them really quickly. The interesting thing about this group is that it's a group out of New Zealand. Very interesting indeed. Now, it seems to be started up here by this Harsimran Singh and Rubal Singh. And those names do not sound Maori. Nope, they don't sound like they're from around here. But I don't have anything really on these guys other than they seem to be a couple of stud realtors. But this is the HRP Investments, and I wanted to point out that it was coming from New Zealand. The reason this story sparked my interest is because I'm familiar with this Pharaon name, and I'll explain as we go here. But this is an article from the Associated Press back in 1991. And this is in regards to a group called Capcom, big cable company. Head of big U.S. cable company linked to BCCI firm. The chairman of the nation's biggest cable television company was a founding shareholder in a firm later indicted for a drug money laundering in the Bank of Credit and Commerce International scandal, a published report says. Bob Magnus, chairman of Telecommunications Incorporated of Denver, was on the board of Capcom Financial Services Limited from its founding in 1984 until shortly after the company was indicted in Tampa in 1988, according to the report. The investments by Magnus and other TCI executive would mark the first link between officials of a non-financial U.S. company and BCCI, which is accused of laundering drug profits, brokering illegal arms sales, and harboring money for terrorists. There's no indication Magnus and TCI Senior Vice President Larry Romrell were connected to any wrongdoing, but their stake in Capcom would deepen the U.S. connections of a group of Arab businessmen close to BCCI, the Luxembourg-based bank seized by regulators worldwide last month. Now, let me just take you down to this here. Capcom was indicted by the federal government in October 1988 in a $32 million drug money laundering and cocaine trafficking case and later expelled from the U.S. commodities markets. The criminal case against Capcom remains open. Okay, so why am I bringing this story up from 1991 regarding Capcom? The New York Magazine article says Magnus, 67, and Romrell, 51, joined with 4 BCCI-linked businessmen to form Capcom, which speculated in the financial and commodities markets. The 4 were identified as Kamal Adam, a Saudi investor in BCCI and in First American Bank shares, a Washington bank the government alleges was acquired illegally by BCCI. Abdul Khalil, another major BCCI and First American shareholder, Syed Jawari, also a BCCI shareholder, and Syed Ziauddin Ali Akbar, the former head of BCCI's treasury operations in London. But here's the kicker. Another investor the magazine named is Hatan Pharaon, the brother of Gaith Pharaon, who we're also going to talk about, whom the government says was BCCI's frontman in the United States. All right, so we've got some Arab investors in this cable company linked to some drug running and some money laundering right across the street from a place where we found a bunch of guns and possibly some tunnels. Here is another older article from the Washington Compost. Probe of BCCI's lost funds leads to an affiliate. Investigators untangling the affairs of the Bank and Credit Commerce International are beginning to find answers to one of the most tantalizing questions raised by the world's biggest banking scandal. Where did all the money go? Yes, we want to know. Hundreds of millions of dollars of BCCI's funds, including $20 million from the BCCI account of deposed Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega, have been traced to a company owned in part by some of the same Middle Eastern investors involved in BCCI's secret purchase of control of First American Bank Shares Incorporated of Washington. Okay, we just talked about that, and that, of course, that's Capcom, right? Now, Let me just introduce the brother here. Corporate records in London show that when Capcom was founded, its dozen shareholders included 3 men who U.S. bank regulators say allegedly were frontmen in BCCI's secret purchase of control of First American. Kamal Adam, the former head of intelligence for Saudi Arabia, A.R. Khalil, a longtime aide to Adam, and Syed El Jawari. We just talked about them, right? Another Saudi business. A fourth Capcom investor was Hatan Faraon, younger brother of Gaith Faraon, the Saudi financier, who has been accused of helping BCCI buy 2 other U.S. banks. All right, so this is Gaith Faraon right here. And as you can see, he's a bit of a baller. He likes to live on this yacht. Now, he was born in 1940, and he's long since passed away. But this guy was a serious baller and was a big-time player. Let's read a little bit about him. Was a Saudi businessman who at one time was an investor in the Bank of Credit Commerce International, like we just said, an international bank established by Pakistani financier Aga Hassan Abedi. Secretly acting on behalf of BCCI, Faraon acquired control of 2 American banks in violation of federal banking laws. When the fraud was discovered, BCCI was forced to sell the banks and soon after shut down by regulators when it was determined to be insolvent. Faraon was charged with wire fraud and racketeering conspiracy, although he eventually paid out substantial fines and a major settlement to the bank's liquidators. The criminal charges were never resolved, and American authorities were seeking his extradition until he died in 2017. But it gets better. Gaith Faraon is the son of the former Saudi ambassador to all Europe from 1948 until 1954. His father was also advisor to King Faisal. Remember that name, King Faisal. He attended schools in Lebanon, Syria, and Switzerland. His university education was in the United States at the Colorado School of Mines from 1958 to 1961, in which he received a doctorate, followed by Stanford University from 1962 to 1963 and Harvard Business School from 1963 to 1965. He was appointed as a member of the Board of Associates of Harvard Business School and as a member of the International Development Council of the Colorado School of Mines. After graduating from Harvard, Faraon formed the Saudi Research and Development Corporation, REDEC, the largest private enterprise in the Middle East. So like I said, this guy was a big-time player, but there's more. Faraon was a key player in the global oil and banking industries in the 1970s and 80s, and at one time, the number 2 Saudi investor in the United States. In 1977, he acquired the National Bank of Georgia from owner Burt Lance as part of a complex scheme to take over a large Washington, D.C. bank, First American Bank shares on behalf of BCCI. This eventually led to criminal charges against him in the United States. He died on January 6, 2017 at the age of 76. Now let's check out some of these military contracts. Although Faraon had been a wanted fugitive by the FBI since 1991 for massive fraud in the financial collapse of BCCI Bank, Faraon was awarded a total of $120 million in contracts by the United States military in 2008. So wait a minute. This guy is a wanted fugitive who has a $120 million contract with the United States military. The contracts were to supply thousands of tons of jet fuel to American bases stationed in Afghanistan and were awarded to Attock Refinery, a Pakistan-based refinery owned by him and directed by Kamal Adam, the former head of, yes, Saudi intelligence. And here's one last little kicker about our guy who actually died years ago. Personal life. The extremely wealthy Faraon was known to have been quite fond of cigars. He lived in his super yacht, which he named Le Pharaon after himself, and this repeatedly was seen moored alongside luxury yachts of the rich and famous. In 2005, it was seen moored next to the personal yacht of Saudi King Abdullah in a Greek port. 2 years earlier, it was seen parked next to another Saudi royal family super yacht near Beirut. In 2016, it was reported that he bought a house in Budapest, right next to the personal residence of the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. That's funny. President Trump was just meeting with him. Now here's a quick bit regarding Laith Faraon, the son. Looks like he is in a Miami-based Saudi group, capital investor, and they've invested in this Six Senses resorts and spas. Laith Faraon, who will become a stakeholder in his management arm of Six Senses Group, Six Senses Mauritius. Founded in 1995, Six Senses currently operates 13 high-end resorts. Their spa division is represented by 27 company-operated spas. The Saudi investor Laith Faraon served as as principal investor for his group, who are involved in a wide range of industries, primarily focused on hospitality and real estate developments worldwide. Let me just read you a little bit here from the Budapest Beacon. This is an article from January 11, 2017, where they were confirming his death. Saudi businessman Gaith Faron confirmed dead in Beirut. Saudi businessman Dr. Gaith Rashad Faron, whose controversial business interests in Hungary became notable after he purchased a property adjacent to the residence of Prime Minister Viktor Orban last year, has been confirmed dead. Faron caused controversy when he was issued a Hungarian residence permit and visa while he was on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list. He also had international warrants for his arrest used by Interpol. The FBI had sought Faron for fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy since 1991, where he was implicated in the scandal surrounding the collapse of the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, one of the largest cases of bank frauds in the United States history, with damages totaling USD 12 billion. But here's the kicker I wanted to share with you here. He was also sought for his alleged connections to the financial networks of terrorist organizations. Okay, so that's what we know about the Faron family, at least a little bit about Gaith, his son Laith, and his brother Hatan, who owned this property. Now, to be fair, Gaith has not been directly implicated in this property, but we do know that Hatan owned it. This was a while back ago, and he sold it to this group from the Virgin Islands, which is very, very suspect, right? Now, this group still seems to own it. They've had it since 2011. They've done nothing with this property. And that's very odd because the people over here weren't doing anything with their property either. Seems like if you had yourself a swanky place worth about 14 grand in property taxes alone, you'd want to do something with that property. Now, I don't have any connections between this Miss Beck and either of the Faron family, but I find it very odd that here you've got these couple wealthy socialites here. Some of them just happen to be connected with Saudi intelligence and drug and gun running and funding of terrorists. And the other one over here happens to be related to Gettys, who happen to be related to tunnels. So no direct connection there, but very, very odd. I also want to point out that there's something else out there in the Virgin Islands. Yeah, that's right. Jeffrey Epstein's island. And he's back in the news himself. Billionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein illegally building Virgin Islands compound. This is from May 9th. Billionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein has gotten himself into a new tangle with the law, running afoul of Virgin Islands environmental regulations with construction on his island compound despite a stop work order. So the guy's got a stop work order. He's already in a ton of trouble for trafficking underage girls. Who knows if it's boys or whatnot, but definitely underage girls onto his island. But Epstein, a hedge fund manager, managed to weasel out of serious consequences for running his pervy syndicate, termed a sex pyramid scheme by the Miami Herald. But here's what he's doing here. Epstein, meanwhile, reportedly is building a compound on the 165-acre island of Great St. James, which he purchased in 2016 for $18 million. He lives on the neighboring Little St. James. The project has been the subject of a stop work order since December, a spokesman for the Virgin Islands Department of Planning and Natural Resources told the Post. The spokesman confirmed that there has been unauthorized work on the island since the stop work order was issued. So what's he building here? Epstein is building a complex of buildings on the island that include an amphitheater and an underwater office and pool. Boy, oh boy, the nuts on this guy, right? The Virgin Island Daily News reports, which will all be linked by a private road. Okay, so this is very, very creepy indeed. And of course, if you guys have seen that funky building that's on his island, the little building that had the little dome shape on there, kind of looks a little bit pharaonic. I'm just saying. So there you go. But let's go back to the map here. So we know the story about these guys over here, and we know a little bit about the stories over here. And let's go ahead and zoom out and put it into a little bit of context for those of you who might not be familiar with Southern California. And I've explained this a little bit before. Forgive me because this is going to be a little slow with my internet. But in this area here is really one of the most swanky places in Southern California. This is Holmby Hills, right near Beverly Hills, and I'm gonna just scream. This is the Holmby Hills area, and if you can see my mouse, it's kind of generally this area right here. It's not quite a circle, but down here at the bottom, we were talking about the Playboy Mansion. Don't forget about that. Over here, we had a house that was actually leased by Michael Jackson. He didn't own it, but we are very familiar with Michael Jackson and some of his activities, and it has been well documented that he likes to build some tunnels under his home too. As a matter of fact, there was a big row about that, about a property that he was trying to buy out there in Las Vegas. And up here we had Jay-Z and Beyonce's home, who, although I don't really care for them, I don't really have anything on them, so I'm not going to include them in this story because I don't really think that's fair unless you've got something solid on them. But we see the idea here, right? Now, the reason I'm bringing this up again is because I have suspected that what's really going on here is, yes, there's probably some gun trafficking going on, but I want to point out that the Playboy Mansion is nearby. And of course, there's lots of famous parties that go on at the Playboy Mansion, right? As a matter of fact, Q has even talked about the Playboy Mansion just a little bit, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But I also want to point out here on the left side of your screen, this is where the Getty Center is. So it's not very far away from Holmby Hills. So it wouldn't be that odd to think that tunnels from the Getty could be connected to homes around the Holmby Hills. And of course, there's long been talk about different tunnels being built near the Playboy Mansion for lots of A-list actors. Now, in between there, we also have the UCLA campus. And UCLA, as I showed you in my last video, is also known to have tons of, yep, you guessed it, tunnels. Now, we also have, I want to point out over here, the Beverly Hills area. And if you can see this here, we've got a couple different properties over here. This one is the Greystone Mansion, which is kind of a story on its own. Landmark estate and iconic film location. But this place is really a big estate. Now, I don't know if there's any tunnels under there, but there was a very famous unsolved mystery that went on the Greystone Mansion. A story we're not going to talk about, but I find it very odd that it's in the neighborhood. Now, near that right here, too, is this Soho House, West Hollywood. And this is an exclusive members-only club near West Hollywood. Now, I'm not sure if there's tunnels under there or not, but you could imagine that if there were, it wouldn't be such a surprise. I also want to point out, too, that Tesla, Elon Musk from Tesla, had recently over the last couple of years printed a map from his boring company all over Los Angeles. So we can already suspect that there's tons and tons of tunnels going under Los Angeles. And what I'm suspecting here is that whatever was going on here in this property in Holmby Hills, yes, probably likely had something to do with gun running. But I tend to think that this is something much more. I think we had a honeypot nearby, and I think that these tunnels were used for human trafficking and very likely plenty of other suspect things. Now, let me take you back to the Googly map one more time. I know I'm talking your face off about tunnels, but I think this is important. I thought this was important when we were talking about this months ago in Iran, and I think it's important talking about it now. You can see I've got the map blown out a little bit here, and in sort of the top left in your screen, this whole area right here is basically the Hollywood Hills area. Hollywood is right here in the center of your screen, and then as you get out towards the water here, you get into Beverly Hills, Bel Air, and this is kind of the Holmby Hills area right here. Now, out here, I've got the Los Angeles County Hall of Records, and I've got that pinged for you. And we're going to zoom in on that Hall of Records because there's something cool that I wanted to show you about this place too. Now, many of you people who are familiar with Southern California probably already know what I am mentioning here. But if we zoom in here further, excuse the internet, we got the Los Angeles County Hall of Records. And there's a cool little story about the Hall of Records here. Sorry while it loads here, but as you kind of go back in the back of this building here, there is a little elevator right there. There, it's filling in. I believe it's right here. Let me see if I can get it in a little bit further for you there. Sorry about all that buffering. Now, I'm not exactly sure. I can't remember exactly where it's at, but it's in the back of the Hall of Records. So I believe it's either here or over here, but I think it's over here. I think it might even be this right here. But there is an elevator down there, and that elevator shaft used to take you down to a series of, yep, you guessed it, tunnels. This is from Thrillist.com. Behind the Hall of Records, 222 North Hill Street, and just off the sidewalk, take an unmarked elevator to the bottom floor, and you can explore some of the underground pedestrian tunnels that used to stretch underneath much of downtown LA. During the Prohibition era, these tunnels were used to shuttle booze, and one of them still runs right to the basement of Skid Row Bar King Eddie Saloon. Much of the network has been declared an earthquake hazard and closed to the public, but the remaining tunnels run under several government buildings, including the Clara Shortridge Foltz Criminal Justice Center and the Stanley Mosque Courthouse. Okay, so we're talking about tunnels, and here's the reason why I'm doing all this talking about tunnels. I want to take you to a couple of Q posts, Q post 158 and Q post 160 from the 20th of November 2017, and I'm going to take you about 2/3 of the way down here on post 158, where Q says, "What are crumbs? Think Hollywood. DC. Define lead in. Think play. What has been occurring recently? The stage must be set. Crumbs are easy to swallow. What if Hugh Hefner was a clown in America? What is a honeypot? Define blackmail. How could this be applied? Fantasyland. Interesting term. Nearby Hefner, we have Neverland, but we're talking about Fantasyland. Now, we do know that Q has alluded to Saudi Arabia as Wonderland, as in Alice in Wonderland, but we've not heard Fantasyland. Interesting reference. Now, in post 160, this Anon seems to get it right, and this is what I'm talking about. You guys are missing the importance of Hugh Hefner. Think of it this way. Hugh invites over celeb politician. Now, listen closely, because this is a very, very common story. Hugh invites over celeb politician. Hugh offers them something younger. Hugh offers them a safe space to do it in. Hugh tapes encounter. Sends tape to CIA. CIA has person by the balls for life. This is majorly important to what has been keeping people in control for so long, and I couldn't agree more. And it looks like Q felt the same way. Ladies and gentlemen, the point that I am making is that this right here in Post 160 is the blueprint for how it all goes down. I don't care if it's DC. I don't care if it's your Hollywood elite. I don't care if it's your athletes, your musicians. This is how it goes. Now, it may not all go down at Hugh's Playboy Mansion, which, like I just demonstrated, has tunnels and is nearby tons and tons of tunnels. This is how it all goes down. Blackmailing them with something younger, giving them a safe space, and then that encounter, if you will, when it's taped and sent to the CIA, gets these politicians, sports stars, athletes, entertainers, newscasters, who knows what, to be incredibly loyal for the rest of their life. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why everyone is in such a panic. Because this doesn't just involve taking Hillary Clinton down, Barack Obama down. This is going to take down a big part of people that we've grown up idolizing, following on TV, listening to on the radio, you name it. And I can tell you, as somebody who's worked in Hollywood, this is a very, very common story. So, is Fantasyland our Playboy Mansion or something like it? We don't really know. There's probably lots of places like that. I wouldn't be surprised if Epstein Island is another one of them. But there's plenty of honeypots just like that, and that's why these people are so complicit in all these crimes, and that's exactly why not just the DC elite, but the Hollywood elite is going after Q. I suppose tunnels would be a very clever way to do this. After all, you've got all these young, aspiring, whether they're models, whether they're actors, whether they're musicians, newscasters, whatnot, or whether they're orphans taken away either through human trafficking or taken out of the orphanage system, as we've talked about at great length. You've got yourself a whole network of tunnels to get them all around communities such as greater Los Angeles area, and they could serve a lot of different purposes, right? Blackmailing tons and tons of people while committing quite a bit of human trafficking in the process. And of course, we've talked at great length also about MK Ultra programs and things like that, CIA operated programs. And I suppose if you're drugging these kids up and getting them to do these things all over these places, you'd also want to move them around in tunnels. After all, I just demonstrated parking is a bit of a pain in Los Angeles, right? So I suppose that would eliminate a lot of those problems. And then, of course, I suppose if you ever wanted to fight back and create yourself a foxtrot, against a president that might be trying to stop all this, then you would have plenty of kids to choose from that are already on your little knucklehead drugged up program. And if you needed to give them some ammunition and a couple of guns to do it with, you've always got your cache of weapons sitting by. Now, those are just theories, ladies and gentlemen. Please understand that everything I gave you today is simply just my research, but I do think it was compelling enough to share, and hopefully this will spark some memories or some new stories out of some of you. But there you go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who do that already. I greatly appreciate it. And if you're new to my channel, welcome to you. Please understand that from time to time, you're going to get unclicked and unnotified and unsubscribed. You don't need to tell me. Just do me a favor and check back and re-click yourself. I'm aware that it's happening. I really, really am. It happens to me every single day, all day. Just do me a favor, come back, click yourself, re-notify yourself, resubscribe yourself. I would be much obliged. I greatly appreciate it. All right, kids, my alternate alternate links are down below to my Gab, my BitChute, my Brighteon.com, and of course I'm over here at IPOT 1776. That's at IPOT 1776, where I often cover a lot of other stories that we don't get time to do in videos. All those links are down below. If you'd like to send me some information, please email me. Do not DM me on Twitter. Please email me. My email link is also down below. My P.O. box is down below if you'd like to send something old school. And of course, if you'd like to support the channel, my Patreon link is down below too. All those links are down below. All right, kids, this is Sir Patrick Mack, and until next time, stay funky.